people that you're going to their door and you're asking them to vote for you.
Yes.
They're parents, they're grandparents, they're hardworking people. They're just trying to get by. And they really, even if they're upset, they just want to be heard. And the trust between them and their government is just completely broken. The decision makers and leaders that we count on to make good decisions on our behalf. And money has such a corrosive influence on that process. You're thinking about the money because you're going to need money all the time for a 2-year cycle. It forces you to make very short-sighted decisions.
Welcome to 60 Minutes with a Woman. Today, again, we have an incredible guest, Merleyn. Merleyn, I have to tell you something. When I came across your content online, I was drawn by the fact that I knew you had a story to share. And I want to thank you for sitting with us today and allowing us to listen to your story.
Oh, absolutely. I'm always happy to share.
Wonderful. All right, let's get to know you more. Merleyn, you are a recovering politician, former Oklahoma state representative, and an outspoken advocate for women, integrity, and authentic leadership. During your time in office, you served in one of the most challenging political environments in the country, where Democrats held 20 out of 101 seats. Your mission was never about political wins. It was about demystifying the process and helping everyday people understand how government truly works. After recognizing the toll that a toxic political culture was taking on your mental and physical well-being, you made the courageous decision to step away from public office and reclaim your sense of purpose. Again, it's a pleasure having you here.
Thank you so much. When you say it that way, it sounds very it sounds like its own story in and of itself. I don't usually think about it that way, but yeah. So
I think that sometimes it takes an external point of view, somebody that really kind of listens to your story to help you realize how powerful what you did really is. I agree.
Well, I'm grateful to you. Thank you.
Well, I would like for the audience to get to know you more on a personal level. Tell us more about where you're from, where you grew up, what were your early influences?
Yeah, so I was born and raised in Oklahoma, and spent 40 plus years there. My hometown, Norman, Oklahoma, is also the home of the university. So it made a lot of natural sense for me to graduate from high school and go to school at this, wonderful college. And then I started working there. Like the day I graduated, I just wasn't ready to leave. I had been doing an internship, and the people that I was interning with kind of took me under their wing and gave me a job there. So I was fully committed to just sort of being in my hometown, living there, contributing things. It's not always super comfortable when you see all the people you went to high school with at Target.
Yeah.
So that was funny. Getting a little old, even though they're all lovely people. But yeah, so I was fully committed to that place and to being a part of that community. I studied a couple of different things in college, actually, but I studied vocal performance to start, because music was something that I loved from the time that I was 10, 11 years old. So I was studying how to perform, and that really was a big influence on me growing up, just performance and music and looking at other performers as sort of, people to look up to as mentors, as idols. So I didn't think about it at the time, but it made for a really natural fit when it came time to pursue politics.
Well, it feels like it's actually far removed from what being a politician is. It feels like it's more about expressing yourself, whereas politics sounds like something where they put you in a box and you really have to follow the rules.
Yeah. Well, if you think about it, from the perspective of somebody who does acting, I did a little bit of acting and musical um, performances in high school and college. And when you think about it that way, as a politician, you are put into a box. Like there's what the job actually is, and
Yes.
there's what people see you performing the job as. And those two things are very different, but there always is this performance aspect to it, because you're performing what people expect to see from you while
Yes.
also, doing all of the other machinations and the actual job itself. But, it's at least 50-50 performance and actual, um, the actual job, I guess.
Yes. Oh, I understand your point of view now. You're really speaking about the fact that, yes, there is a lot of structure into being a politician, but then there is a lot of delivery of the message, which includes
Exactly.
performing.
Yeah.
So, yes, performing your job. So, yeah, good point. See, I actually never thought about it that way. So, you just mentioned that you didn't always think about becoming a politician. And I would like to ask you what pivotal moment triggered that decision in your life, and also what inspired you to run for state representative of Oklahoma?
Yeah. So I think about this a lot actually, because there's not really one moment. There
Okay.
there are a couple of pivotal ones along the way, but there wasn't really one day where I thought, yes, this is something that I really want to do. It was part encouragement from other people who, said, you kind of have the skill set that it would take to do this. Why don't you come and learn a little bit more about it? And, it was like a couple of seminars and a couple of conversations. And then that seed at least was planted in my mind. But there wasn't one sort of like light bulb or aha that went off. It was the culmination of being a new mom and raising a toddler, I guess, at that time, and thinking about what his future in Oklahoma was going to look like. Because
Yeah,
again, I was like, this is my home, this is where I'm always going to be. And so what
absolutely.
is his life like going to be? What is his life going to be like here? And also, in a very selfish way, as a parent, thinking, okay, well, I stayed here because my family is here and my roots are here. But what if he decides he wants to be, a mechanical engineer? What if he decides that he
Yes.
wants to be a musician? What if he decides that he wants to do all these other things? Do we live in a place where I can keep him here?
Right.
Where I can instill that deep sense of belonging in him,
Hmm.
to where he'll want to stay here and he'll see that there are opportunities for him here. And really, since the time I was in college, I was hearing from everybody else around me, oh, well, if you want to do anything, you're going to have to move to Austin, you're going to have to move to Dallas, you're going to have to move to, Chicago or something like that. And being a selfish mom of one, I was like, but I don't want my baby to leave. So what do I need to do here over the
Yes.
next, 18, 16 years or whatever, to make sure that he has all those opportunities? That's when I started learning that there were so many issues, and that really the fundamental issue was in public education. So I
I
got,
love it.
really involved in going to PTA meetings and going to Democratic Party meetings and going to, whatever it was, to kind of like learn, figure out where those cracks were in the system. And it was like the more I went to meetings, the more cracks I found, and the more conversations I had, the more problems arose. Um, so it just kind of snowballed, you know.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that people tend to always want to leave and aim for something that is far from what they know. And we don't do sometimes enough in our own hometown. I love the fact that you made that decision, that you decided to make it happen where you were. And I
Yeah.
mean, I can only imagine when you realize all the cracks, how you call them, that kept accumulating and all the job that you knew you had to do. You must have been like,
Yeah.
whoa.
Oh no, yeah. And it's funny because now I try to encourage other people to be that involved, not to run for office and, do the exact same thing that I did, but at least to sort of know what's going on in your community, because I
Yes.
really believe in blooming where you're planted, that you have an opportunity. And I had met so many people along the way who were trying to make the same investments in Oklahoma that I was. People who said, well, I love music, but we don't have a big enough music scene.
Right. Yes.
Austin has a huge music scene, but I went down there and it's not here. Like it's not my
Yes, it's
home.
not the same.
And so why don't I just start a music festival here? Okay. So now we have our own, music festival, or now we have our own downtown revitalization, or now we have our own restaurant scene and food scene in Oklahoma City that's just like, exploded because people were willing to make that investment and bloom where they're planted rather than, well, I have to go to New York to make it. I have to go
Yes.
to LA to make it. And I've always really appreciated that because to me, there was no going anywhere else, not without my family. And,
Yes.
but like pulling up those roots to me just felt very, um, just something that I couldn't imagine doing. So,
I can really feel the sense of belonging
yeah,
when you speak
yeah.
about Oklahoma. It's very strong. I love that. I think that now the newer generation are losing it a little bit, maybe
Hmm.
because we don't have this sense of community anymore. So
Yeah.
I understand why you cherished that environment and you really wanted it to grow and bloom. I think that as long as you can initiate the change, people are willing to
Hmm.
follow. But as we are going to speak about shortly, sometimes it's a mountain to climb. And like we're going to speak about it now, but
Yeah.
it takes a toll on you. So, I
Yeah.
mean, it's obviously not something easy to do, but I love the fact that you really had faith and you wanted to make it happen. That
Yeah.
speaks volume about who you are really as a person. Um, well, I wanted to ask you a question as well. Um, Once elected, what was the biggest surprise about the inner workings of the legislature?
I think the pace was the most shocking to me. Um, I've described it before as being like one long networking event where that you're always just meeting new people every single day and you don't
Yes.
have a lot of time to process. And not only was that different from my previous position where I was a graphic designer, so I kind of sat at my desk all day and ruminated about things before I did them. It was just the pace was incredible. But it also really it went against my nature, like what I know to be my
Yes.
nature now, because I like having, one-on-one conversations. I like getting to the root of things with people. And it's not that it's necessarily surface, but you just don't have the time to
Yes.
talk to everyone. So it becomes very much, it's almost like the difference between living in a small town and a big city
Yes.
and I'm sure that you've experienced this in New York, where it's like, well, people aren't necessarily rude. They just have some place to be
Yes.
and they don't have a lot of time to like, chit chat with you. It's just like, what do you want? And that pace felt very similar to like being in a big city where it's like everybody needs something from you. You need something from everybody else. There's not really any time. So just get to it, just get to it. So that was probably the most shocking thing. But I was also, I was also a little shocked by how little like training there was because
Okay.
we talk a lot about being a candidate and running a campaign. There are campaign managers, there are like all of these operatives around you when you're running for office and people who have a lot of advice for you when you're running for
Hmm.
office. And once you become an elected official, that all just kind of goes away. Like
I
there's
see.
no training on how to actually do that job. And you don't really know what you're doing until you're doing it. It's like building the plane as you're flying it.
Yes.
And that information becomes a lot more not secretive, but it's just sort of the idea is like, well, you'll figure it out. It's
Right.
like, no, but I want you to tell me,
Exactly.
like, tell me how
Yes.
to do this, and there, you just kind of have to, so the pace of activity doesn't match the pace of learning and understanding.
Yes.
One's going very slow while one's going super fast. And just that dichotomy was sort of jarring and hard to get used to.
What I hear is a crossroad of conflicts. Really,
Yeah.
you want to make a difference. You get all the support because you're likable, and so they want
Hmm.
to support you because they know they're going to get the vote. After you don't get the mentorship you're looking for, everything moves slowly. There is a lot
Hmm.
of buildup of frustration, and nothing really gets done.
Yes.
I really can see how this environment can be frustrating, and
Hmm.
I can't even imagine how to navigate that environment.
Yeah.
You spoke about New York, and I think the big cities have an administration that is through the roof. Whatever you need that needs to be done here takes
Hmm.
forever. But then the project takes forever as well. And if the decision making takes a long time, now we are speaking about decades of changes, which
Right.
could have been done in 3 years. And I think that 10 years from now, the needs are not the same. So by the time
Right.
you're completing a project, you're already late on what should have been done in the meantime.
Hmm.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
yeah. This is not my personality. I would never be
Yeah.
able to thrive in an environment where I have to pull my hair just to
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, and one of the other things is that it sort of worked in the reverse of what you're saying, where I expected to sit around, tables and have like committee meetings where we were thinking in the long term. We were doing some long term planning about education, about workforce requirements, about um, transportation, for
Yes.
instance. And what I really learned was that it's more like a band aid factory.
Mm,
It's like if the problem is just something, if it's like a boo boo, we can fix a
yes.
boo boo.
Yes.
But we don't have the time or really the inclination to talk about things that need to be fixed so that they don't fall apart in 10 years.
All right. Yes.
It's like we can't talk about it until it's already falling apart.
Yes.
And that was super frustrating for me because I thought, well, if we're not the ones who are making long-term plans for the state, then who is?
Yes.
Who like who better to do this than the people who are kind of looking at the budget and getting to know all of the different agencies and departments and what their needs are. You just, it basically made it, and it was frustrating because it would also make it to where those agencies couldn't do long-term planning either because they're not coming to you with a budget request for 10 years from now. They're coming with you for a budget request for right now. And what they're telling you is, like for something like Real ID that took forever to
Yes.
finally get done in Oklahoma, and they're still working on it. With Real ID, the department came and said, hey, our computer systems are from 40 years ago. Like, we're not going to be able to handle this. Oh, okay, well, but we don't have to do that until, you know, 4 years from now. So don't ask us to do that in the budget this year. Just hold on until next year, whatever. And they just keep kicking the can and kicking the can. And then once it becomes a crisis where it's like, well, it's federally required now. So we're going to try and do it on our old computer system. And that's going to crash every day because you didn't give us the funding to, it's
Yes.
like,
Yes. Yes.
why
Yes.
does it just have to be a band-aid? Why can't we actually do
Yeah.
something preventative rather than just putting band-aids on boo-boos?
That is so frustrating. If I can convert and translate what you said to real estate, which is really my niche,
Yeah.
it would be buying a house that looks incredible on the outside. And you're like, I'm going to move into this new neighborhood and I'm going to create my new life and new opportunities. And then you get in the house and the roof is leaking and the plumbing needs to be changed
Yes.
and the sewer is, and you
Yes.
have pests and you didn't know you had termites as well.
Yeah.
And then the kitchen sink is just leaking all over and you're like, oh my gosh.
Yeah. But it
I
looks
gotta get
great from the
working.
outside.
Exactly, but it
Great.
looks great from the outside.
Hmm.
Yeah. So I also wanted to ask you about what did the campaign teach you about people, about yourself, and about the political process?
I think the most important lesson that it taught me was that people aren't these partisan warriors, like people that you're going to their door and worrying what they're going to say if they open the door and you're asking them to vote for you.
Yes.
They're parents, they're grandparents, they're hardworking people. They're just trying to get by. And they really, even if they're upset, they just want to be heard. They
Yes.
just feel like they're not being listened to. And so many times I would get in trouble with campaign operatives who were like, you just spent 13 minutes at that person's door. You can't keep that pace. Like you were supposed to knock 300 doors today and you're never going to make it. And I'm like, yeah, but they told me this story about how,
Yeah.
their disability benefits were disrupted and blah, 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 blah. And we really need to do something. But, it's like that person, it may have taken longer at their door, but it's because they really wanted to be heard.
Yeah.
And I'm the person that stopped and listened to them. And that's going to have a ripple effect. Like they're going to tell people about that and they're going to remember it for next time. And hopefully, rather than yelling at the next person who comes to ask for their vote, they're going to say, okay, I'm really frustrated about this. Can you do something about this rather than just opening the door and yelling? Because plenty of people yell at you, you know.
Yes.
But it's mainly because nobody listened to them before you.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's not about you. And so
They
it really
think
taught
you
me,
want their vote. And so you are going to
yeah,
kind of, come up with all the speech you already prepared,
right.
and they don't have
Yeah.
time for that because they
They don't
have
have
real life
time.
issues.
Exactly. And they've
Yeah.
heard it all before. And the trust between them and their government is just completely broken. And
Yes.
here you are saying, I want to be a part of this broken thing. And they're like, get out of my face. So, so yeah, I mean, but those conversations where I actually just took the time to listen to people were not just fruitful for me, but I think that they really helped to repair the damage in that relationship for
Yes.
them. And some of the people who were the meanest to start with, whether it was because they said something hateful on social media or whatever, those are the people I still talk to today who are like, hey, did you hear about this thing that's happening? And I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, I know. I'm not happy about that either. But thanks for reaching out. It's like it helped to build a bridge. And so much of the campaign, the way that we're taught to campaign
Yes.
is, about the numbers and what your win number is and how many doors you have to knock every day. And really, it's just about relationships and about listening.
Yes, yes, yes. What about the funding? Do you also have to find your own sponsors, or is it something that is, I mean, you have sponsors already lined up for the project?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's one of the most frustrating things to me about politics. One of the most broken things at every level is the fact that it's so expensive to
Yes.
run for office, depending on the office. But it can be very expensive. We see people in Congress who run, and it's hundreds of thousands of dollars for one campaign cycle, which is
Yes.
just crazy. Because a lot of that gets spent on fluff, to be
Yes.
honest. A lot of that is spent on maintaining the political machine, right? And all these people who get fed from that machine. But the other part of it is that, there are people who give you money with the intention of you doing something for them in return later. Now, at the state level, especially when you're in a minority, they're not counting on me to get their bills passed, right? They're sort of like throwing me a bone, like, well, we give $500 to everybody, so we'll give you $500 too. That's what we've traditionally done. Um, so the other side of fundraising is collecting from or getting um, donations
Hmm.
from people that like from your actual neighbors or from your family or from campaign supporters who just want to support you. Those are the dollars that obviously mean the most.
Yes.
But they're also, at least in my mind, the hardest ones to ask for because I have listened to people and I do know their stories and I know that they're on disability or I know that they're on, a retirement pension or something and they're giving me $50. That,
Yeah.
wow, when it comes to the corporations and lobbying groups and whatever, it's like, that's it.
Yeah.
That's all you're going to get. No. But it doesn't mean as much to me and it doesn't hold as much sway over me for a lobbyist to give me $500 as it does for the lady down the street who's known me since I was 12 to give me $50. Um, so I wish, like, if I could wave a magic wand, I would change the way that we campaign and the length of time that we campaign and just smush it down,
Yeah.
and really have a much more simplified way of campaigning and reaching people that doesn't cost so much money, um, that doesn't require people to, invest so much, that doesn't require those businesses and outside influences to contribute. And, it creates this, it's just gross. It's just a kind of a gross
I
system
agree.
to get a job that really does matter a lot. These are like the decision makers and leaders, um, that we count on to make good decisions on our behalf. And money has such a corrosive influence on that process that I wish we could just completely do away with it. But I think the way that we do away with that is something that people don't really want to discuss. Like it's a big lift to say, for instance, to the legislature in the state where I live now in Nevada, they meet every other year. And the people who serve in the assembly, which is the equivalent of the state house of representatives, they make $8,000 to serve. I think for both of those years. So their
Okay.
stipend is $8,000 plus if they live like in Las Vegas and they have to travel, they get reimbursed for their travel. Not first class private charter travel, just
Yeah.
a Southwest flight between Vegas and Reno. Um, but they do get reimbursed for that. So the only people who can really afford to serve are people who have jobs that are flexible and that
Yes.
are lucrative enough that, yeah, I'm a personal attorney. So I can take off from my job because I'm basically my own boss, or I work at a firm where I already, have my name on the door. And so I can take that time off for 120 days every other year. I'm only going to make 8K, but who cares? Like it'll be fun and I only have to do it for a little bit. That's not most people.
Yeah. No, it's not.
That's not most people at all. And so, then you have to say to taxpayers and to people who are, supposed to be benefiting from that system, okay, we need to pay these people $80,000,
Yeah.
not $8,000. We need to pay them to be here all the time. They need to meet every year. So we need more in our budget, which means that we might need for you to pay a little bit more. That's just not going to happen,
Yeah.
because that relationship with their government is already, if not completely broken, at least there are cracks in it. And they're like, wait, you want us to pay you more?
Yeah.
Like, what's the return on investment that we're getting already? I don't see it. So no, we're not going to pay you more to do this job. So it just becomes impossible. And then of course you have the people from companies and lobbyist groups and associations or whatever, these special interests, as we call them, who are happy to come in and help supplement that. Don't worry, we'll donate to you, so that you can get elected to this. But it's no big deal, we'll help take care of you. And it just creates this monster that can't be, um that just you can't take it on without a huge systemic change.
It's understandable that you're passionate about, once again, unveiling all the underlying details of being in
Mm-hmm.
politics. People don't know about it, and you ended up quitting for a reason. So I love the fact that you opened up on really what happened. It's very
Yeah.
important to raise awareness. I think that people tend to think that nobody's trying in politics. I think we feel
Mm,
that politicians have given up on us. And
yeah.
the truth is that they probably have just quit altogether. They ended up
Yeah.
realizing they couldn't do much and they wanted to do better.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you also, how did you envision politics before becoming involved in it?
Oh, I mean, honestly, I had a pretty naive idea
Okay.
of
So we all do. It's fine.
politics. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I knew that there were inner workings. I knew that it wasn't all just like sunshine and rainbows, but I still imagined that it was about ideas
Yes.
and that the best idea at the end of the day is the one that would win. And I didn't think about how grinding and how incremental. I didn't think about it, especially being that Band-Aid factory. That
Right.
that to me still baffles me.
Yeah.
But I mean, I know that there are reasons why. Like, in Oklahoma, there are term limits. So you can only serve for 12 years. And that's because people were in there for a long, long, long time. But without without people serving longer than 12 years, you sort of lose that institutional knowledge, and
Yes.
you lose that incentive for people to sit down at a table and say, okay, what about 5 years from now? Because they're always worried that in 2 years they're not going to be there
Yeah.
anymore. You have to get reelected every 2 years or every four if you're in the Senate, and that makes your timeline in your mind so short. You're like, well, what wins can I get so that when I run next year, I can take them back to my district and say, I did
Mm.
this and this and
Yes.
this and this. Like, nobody wants to hear, well, I didn't do anything, but I had some great meetings about what we're going to
Right.
do 10 years from now. They're like, no, what did you do now? Like, where are the band-aids? Like, what did you fix?
I never thought
And
about this
so,
downside, actually. I thought that having
yeah.
short terms was amazing because it forced people, politicians, to have to show up for the people and for themselves
Hmm.
every so and then. But now I realize that their goal is to do as much as possible, like you mentioned, so they can
Hmm.
show a good face in front of people
Right.
the following time that they want to be reelected, which is 100%. It compromises really the fact that they are reelected every so and then so they can be more competent and show up more efficiently for people. You know what I mean?
Right.
It
Yeah.
just cancels each other completely. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes it really tough because they're always, if you're on a 2-year cycle, then you're always in campaign mode.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
always
Oh
thinking
my
about
word.
who's over, you're looking over your shoulder to
Yeah.
see who's, coming for you, who might want to primary you or who
Yeah.
might want to run against you. You're thinking about the money because you're going to need money all
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
time
Yeah.
for a
Yeah. Yeah.
2-year cycle. It forces you to make very short-sighted decisions. And then people wonder, like, well, why didn't they do anything about this? It's like, well, that's not, we only had, it's in places like Nevada. I worked in the speaker's office after I moved here as a policy advisor. And I was like, oh, this is going to be great because I'm going to see it from the other side and I'll be in a Democratic majority. And I can't tell you how many times people said, well, I mean, that's kind of a big lift for 120 days. We can't do that this
Yeah.
cycle, but we'll do it next time. And I'm like, but next time is 2 years from now.
Right.
And this needs to be fixed now. So instead
Yeah.
of it being a Band-Aid factory, it was like, oh,
Yes.
we'll get to it next time. It's like,
Now
that's so far away.
you make me think. I thought about real estate earlier, but now you're making me think about a sinking ship and everybody's kind of this bucket of water trying to keep it afloat as much as possible. It's like,
Yeah. Yeah. You are sort of like plugging the holes in the boat
that's
because you
awful.
know that you can't do everything in that time. But again, that goes back to what are you going to tell voters? We don't have enough time to do all of the work that's needed. And they're
Yes,
going to be
yes,
like, but
yes,
we
yes.
don't see you doing any work at all.
Yeah, yeah,
Like,
yeah.
what do you mean you don't have enough time? I don't even know what to call it. It's just a very, unworkable situation and a very toxic situation. Um,
So
yeah.
this big disappointment when you finally got involved in politics. Honestly, I'm
Yeah.
not surprised. What unique challenges have you faced as a woman in politics that your male
Mm.
colleagues, sorry, might not encounter? We kind of scratched the surface last time about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I think the most frustrating thing is the double standard that, you can be assertive, but you can't be too aggressive. And you can be collaborative, but you can't be soft. It's
Yeah.
like you're never the perfect version of yourself. And honestly, even the other day I was watching the news and there was this commentator talking about back in his day when he worked in the Senate, the US Senate as a staffer, he would see two men get so passionate about an issue that they almost came to blows.
Oh.
And I'm like, what, grown men? We're gonna we're gonna physically fight over
Yeah.
over a bill? That sounds super immature. And if I did that, like if I got into a cat fight with somebody and what was just like clawing at them with my acrylic nails, they'd be like, wow, that's super unserious. I can't.
Yeah.
So I just feel like there's always this double standard. There's a lot of explaining. Like I've had men explain my bills to me, like, well, the thing you need to know about this blah 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 blah. And I'm like, I do know. I drafted the bill and I did all the research and I had an interim study about it and I did all the stuff, to be prepared for the
Yeah.
bill. Like I know what I'm talking about. So, I think that's probably the most frustrating part. And then there's also the safety dimension that I feel like I received the kind of threats, in the news right now, there's a lot of talk about threats against members, especially in Congress, and that they don't feel safe because the rhetoric has gotten so toxic,
Yeah.
for lack of a better word, that they're getting all these messages about harm to them and their families. I got those kind of messages.
You did?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know a member that didn't, really, especially Democratic members. But, I would always approach them and I would feel like I had to approach them with a softness and hey, thank you for calling me. Do you want to talk about this in a more
Yes.
like measured way? I could never call them back and be like, just match that energy.
Of
I
course
felt
not.
in terms of protecting my own safety that I
Yes.
had to say, yeah, I really see your point of view and whatever, even though I was like
Yeah.
raging inside,
And they know where you
Um,
live, they know your family, I
yeah,
mean, your
yeah.
car, they know everything about your life. So
Oh,
that's a
absolutely.
major threat. Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so see, I'm glad you shared that with us. I don't know if someone else knew
Yeah.
about that or, maybe even thought about it, but I have never
Hmm.
realized that representing the public really meant also if you disappoint them, you could be victim of aggressions or just
Hmm.
reactions that can endanger your life or your safety, which is a
Yeah.
major concern. Do you have anything in place? Do you learn about how to, is there like a class or explanations about, hey guys, if you end up in this situation, here's what you should do? None of it.
No,
Like a
no,
guideline to follow, you have to figure things out by
no.
yourself.
Yeah, you need to ask somebody else. Like the first time I got a really threatening voicemail, my legislative assistant told me about it, and I listened to the message, and I thought, okay, that person sounds really angry. He did like threaten violence, so I'm just gonna ask my suite mate, like, hey, have you ever gotten one of these calls before? What did
Yeah.
you do, since she'd been there longer? And, they were like, oh, yeah, I got one of those last year. And so this is what you do. But that's kind of how you find out everything. Back to that point I was making about there being no training.
Yes.
You just have to ask somebody who's been there longer. and see if they've had the same experience. And then they say, okay, well, then you contact this person and, like document it, pass it on to law enforcement, and
Yes.
whatever. But that's kind of how everything is. It's like you have to experience it first and then deal with it rather than prepare for something that, once it's happened to you, then you kind of know it's inevitable.
Right.
That's going to happen because somebody else always says, oh, yeah, no, I've dealt with that. Or actually, I've dealt with that person.
Okay, so that's even, but the thing is not about not knowing that this might happen. It's about knowing how to react properly to the situation and
Yes.
also de-escalate the dangerous situation that
Mm-hmm.
you've been put into. And I think that should be just as part of the very first day, trainee day,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's like, hey, trainee day for new elected officials. Here's what's going to happen to you, and here's how you have to handle it. It's so important. I can't believe that they just bypass completely that crucial subject. Well, I remember when we spoke also about the challenges that women faced. You mentioned something that really made me laugh, is that sometimes they thought you were the assistant. You said, wherever I go, it's like if you're the assistant of the actual official. And I thought, yes, it's just a never ending story. We are still there. Although we made it that far.
Yeah. Especially in places that are very steeped in, I don't even want to call it tradition, but they're just very, stuck in their ways. There are people who have worked there for a really long time, and they're all,
you would say older, maybe older men, or
yes, older men, sometimes older women.
Yeah, I was going to ask also, because sometimes women can be surprising too.
Depending on, you get to choose to a certain extent who you get to say, I would like for this person to work for me when you choose a legislative assistant. But at least in Oklahoma, that person typically, unless they work for somebody in leadership, works for two members. So you kind of have to come to an agreement and say, hey, let's choose from this pool of people, or let's recommend somebody, and both agree to hire them. Now, in my case, that was usually somebody who was a lot younger. And so they would have to interact with people, with older women who were assistants, who were like still making dentist appointments for their member and picking up their dry cleaning and stuff. And I was like, that's just not something I'm going to ask anybody to do for me in the first place. But the fact that they're still doing it, so they're, especially if they live at a distance from the Capitol, because some people don't live in Oklahoma City, they live 3 hours away. Their assistant really becomes like their life assistant.
Yes.
It's like they're the person who takes on the duties of maybe their spouse when they're not there, like making all those appointments and, oh, I picked up lunch for you, and, like all this other stuff. So in their mind, I think it's very natural to assume, well, there aren't that many women. Because I'm trying to think, there were maybe,
you were,
I'm going to say like 20 women. I can't remember
the
exact number.
Democrats and Republican?
Yeah.
20 combined.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe. It might be more than that. But, if you're new there and they've never seen you before, and, they're from, 3 hours away, and they're here at the Capitol and they're used to seeing the faces that they see. If they see you and you don't have a pin on your lapel that says like, I'm a member or whatever, they just go, oh, so who do you work for?
Oh, yeah, right.
Or, I'm sorry, you can't be here. That happens several times where it's like, you're not allowed to be in here in this particular room. And it's like, but I am. See,
right.
like that.
Incredible. People don't realize, very often, I think, especially men would think that women are nagging about the fact that, they get confused with something they're not, or things like that. But it really impacts your self-confidence and how you show up for yourself, to always have to justify that you deserve to be here as much as they do. Right. So although you can kind of build an armor to not take that
Hmm.
personally. It's exhausting over time. So I can't believe that
Yes.
politics are
Yeah.
still backward to that point.
Yeah.
You know, I always imagined, as I think a lot of people do, politicians as people driven, and we spoke about it. I think we start like
Hmm.
that, driven to take action and make a real difference in the world. And I wanted to ask you, now that we know it's not always the case, from your realistic point of view and experience, what kinds of challenges and rewards, both positive and negative,
Hmm.
does one face when entering politics?
So I want to give a balanced answer so that I talk about the challenges and the rewards because there
Okay.
are some rewards. Um, let me just start by saying the challenges. The challenges are that it's a very um, foreboding environment to tackle. You don't know what you don't know when
Right.
you walk in the door, and there are all these expectations on you, and there are people putting their ideas of what you're supposed to be doing on you. Um, so that at the base level can be really challenging. Um, there's the grind of it, which can be, very demoralizing. You're working in what I would consider one of the most toxic workplaces you could possibly work in. Um,
Wow, that's a strong statement.
yeah. Well, I think we talked about this before that I was listening to a podcast several years ago when I was serving in office. I was
Yeah.
driving in the traffic. I was late, and I'm like trying to get up to the Capitol. And I was listening to this podcast, and they were talking about why people in 2022 is when this was, were leaving workplaces in droves, like whether
Yeah.
they worked at Arby's or Apple. It was like
Yeah.
they were calling it the Great Resignation. And there were some researchers on this podcast I was listening to who talked about what the 5 toxic traits of the workplace are.
Yeah.
Because so much of the time we think it's like, oh, people aren't getting compensated enough, you know. But they said, no, our research really shows that it's because of a toxic environment. And
Yeah.
there are 5 key traits to that toxic environment. There's non-inclusiveness, um, abusive management, there's cutthroat competition.
Right.
That one really got me. Unethical behavior, which we could do a whole podcast about unethical behavior, and just a general disrespect, like from your manager, from your peers, from whatever. And so by the time I got to the Capitol and like sat down in my office, I was like, this workplace is all 5 of those things. And I don't know that any of those things are fixable, without, again, a huge systemic change that people are actually willing to buy into.
Yeah.
But you can't, and the competitiveness, like that's just baked in. If we're on this 2-year cycle, you only have 12 years, and people are always competing and jockeying for positions and power. And, so it was like, oh no, I work in like the most toxic work. It's like a 5 out of 5 toxicity. Um, so once I realized that, it became
Yeah.
very challenging to navigate all of these different things. Like, I genuinely thought, I see now how this is going. And I still thought naively, if I just keep doing, the things that I'm doing, even if I'm not getting like big wins, like passing bills, it'll all still lead to a change in this toxic place. And once I realized that it's not even going to make a dent,
Yeah.
I was like, oh, well, now I kind of have to make a decision for myself. But the rewarding part of it that kept me there even after this realization was that you do get to help people. You do get to interact with people. You do get to be, for all of its faults, an ambassador for your state.
Yeah.
You get to be a champion for the people in your state, the people in your district. You get to be, a big cheerleader and sort of a guide through a very murky system that's meant to be, it's like baked into it that it is confusing and daunting for the average person to actually interact and get what they need from their government. And so being able to serve in that way and help people to sort of demystify that process that's the reward, like the biggest reward that made all those challenges worth it until it didn't. Until like I just got to that point where I
Yeah.
thought, there must be another way to help people. Like, can I take all the information that I've learned now and take it out of this toxic environment and still teach people, how to do these things and give them a sense of empowerment in that process that I can't give them in this toxic environment.
Oh, I love your answer. You really wrapped up a
Oh,
lot of
good.
questions that I had for you in this answer, and you put it together beautifully. And
Well, thank
it's,
you.
we spoke about it last time, and we said how people don't realize that officials are actually at the service of the public, and people should be, stepping up for their own rights and trying to get in
Yes.
contact and in touch with the represented, so, the people who represent them. Sorry, because that's why government is there, exists.
Hmm.
Is to serve the people first, and how people just feel that there is a distance, and at the same time there
Yes.
is a sense of it's not going to make any difference, and people feel
Hmm.
crushed. And life doesn't wait for you to have the answer for an official. You still have to pay your bills, raise your
Hmm.
children, take care of your family, go to work. You don't have the time for that. And
Yeah.
I love the fact that this is what kept you going, wanting to demystify the process for people.
Hmm.
And at some point, you had to put yourself first, but you still feel proud about this portion of your life and career that you got to experience. The fact that you were able
Yeah.
to be that bridge for people. And I love, love, love that about you. And I want to thank you again, because this is what I felt when I went on your social media. I felt somebody who really wanted to say, hey, I was there and this is what went wrong, but we still can do something together. And something else also, I'm just going to jump
Hmm.
because we almost at the end of the podcast, but I'm going to jump to
Oh
what
gosh.
you're
Okay.
doing. Yeah, it went by super fast. But you still are doing a lot, sorry, nowadays with your bracelet. Do you want to tell us more about that? You still help
Oh,
people.
sure. Yeah. Yeah. So, I moved to Nevada 3 years ago, a little over 3 years ago, and went through this process of sort of figuring out that I'm a recovering politician, as I call it, because I still want to do good. At heart, I'm a do gooder, you know, and I still want to solve the problem that I originally went into politics for, which was
Yeah.
to properly fund public education. Um, because I'm so passionate about it, I look at our schools as the great equalizers in our community, where every kid, it should be waking up, getting fed, going to school, learning what they need to learn, and becoming the the contributors and the citizens that we want for them to be in the future. That's what
Yes.
always motivated me just when it came to my own son, is I'm trying to prepare him to be that citizen and be a part of something that's bigger than himself in his own community. So I knew at a certain point that I couldn't do that from the inside. I moved here, I continued to work in government, and I was still trying to pursue that. I can't tell you how many interviews I did
Where is he here?
in Nevada.
Oh, in
Yeah, so
Nevada.
I
Yes.
yeah, so I worked in state government here for like almost a year, and then realized, oh, like there are different people in charge, it's a different state, but that toxicity still remains.
Right.
It's basically the same system. So how can I contribute? Like, what can I do? So part of what I do is still that educating and demystifying the process and helping to connect people to their government so that they realize that government isn't just doing things to them, it's supposed to be doing things for them.
Right.
And everybody who's in government is there for them, they work for them. But on a smaller scale, like I really started to understand the benefit and the ripple effect that mutual aid projects can have, where again, you bloom where you're planted, you see that there are problems right in your own backyard, and you work to try to fix them. And one of the things that inspired me was that my mom, ages ago, when I was younger, was creating bracelets. Like she and my dad owned a bead store, and people would come into the bead store and say, "Oh, well, I go to this school, or I'm in this organization. I'm a Girl Scout. I'm in a sorority. I'm in a dance troupe, or whatever." And they would make bracelets with charms on them that sort of represented that organization or school or whatever. So I thought, as I was doing fundraising with my own kid, and the fundraisers were like, buy this frozen cookie dough, or buy wrapping paper that you're never going to use, or whatever. I thought, why can't we fundraise by using bracelets like this, like the ones that I have on my arm
Oh,
here,
it's pretty.
and my two favorite team colors, because I'm still an Oklahoma girl at heart. So I have my OU colors and my OKC Thunder colors. So I was like, why can't we sell bracelets and give the proceeds to schools, so that they're not only selling a product that will help raise money, but they're selling belonging to
Right.
something that's bigger. And that process of realizing that, like, part of the reason why we struggle so much in this discussion, that the larger, like, public education, like capital E education discussion, is because people don't feel that sense of belonging.
No, they don't. It's
They
true.
feel, there's so many people who feel cast out. That's why it's been so enticing to people to go along with the idea that we should be privatizing public education, because that's a broken system and we're
Yeah.
never going to fix it. So let's just privatize it. And that way, we can spend the money differently. We'll still get government money, but we'll only let some kids in. It's
Right.
just, it's the most nefarious, frustrating thing to see parents. And I've had conversations with parents where I tell them, gosh, I wish I had seen you at PTA 5 years ago. So we could have had this discussion then, before
Yes.
you completely gave up on that system, because you are the kind of person who could have fixed this if you had just, like, engaged and approached it from a place of you being the one in control of that situation. That public school system failed your kid, and it's not
Yeah.
supposed to. It's constitutionally required that they don't fail. So you have a responsibility to your kid as a parent, but also to the larger community to help try and fix that. But now there are so many actors who have come in and said, no, it's broken. Let's just get rid of the
Yeah.
Department of Education. Let's get rid of public funding. Let's get rid of all this stuff. And I don't, more than anything, I do not want to see that happen. And if I have to figure out a way to save public education one bracelet at a time, then that's what I'm going to do. Because reinstilling that belonging in people and giving them the funding at the same time, and, like, rebuilding our communities through these sort of, like, badges of belonging, that's really what I hope to do. That's why I started the Charm Collective.
You're going to get me emotional here. Really,
I
it's a powerful and strong message. It really brings back once again faith into places where we completely lost faith. It
Yeah.
public system is just like you said, broken. It has been for so long. Like
Hmm.
it's incredible to have insiders, I'm going to call you like that, who still want to make it happen and are still fighting for it. Do
Yeah.
you is it now, how can people support you? Do you have an online store? Is it on TikTok mainly?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, so we have the TikTok shop where I just sell, like, we have a holiday collection just for fun, to sort of show people the different designs that we can build. But the real goal is that if people have, a school or an organization that they support, like on Giving Tuesday, we're doing several fundraisers starting next Tuesday for local organizations here in Reno, Nevada, that we can expand out to anywhere. So this is, like, for every school, every organization in the United States. If they want to host a fundraiser with us, we'll make them a custom bracelet that will give them that community belonging, but also help raise funds for them. We give 50% of every sale to the organization, which is crazy. And my mom slash business partner is not super excited about that margin. But it's more, I mean, for me, it's more important that we give the schools as much as we can, you know. And then we also, to your point, sell bracelets for like, NBA style teams and college teams, things like that on our website, thecharmcollective.net.
That's incredible. That's
Yeah.
incredible, really. And we even spoke about the fact of maybe having the 60 Minutes with a Woman bracelet. So if you
Yes.
want to have, if you want to see that happening, please write me a comment. I'd love to know if this is something we should be doing. And I will write in the description down below how people can reach out to you. And
Oh, awesome. Thank you.
I wanted to ask you also two more questions before I let
Okay.
you go.
Okay.
One is 100% out of curiosity. Okay. First thing that I asked myself when I came across your content is, aren't you under an NDA agreement or something that should have prevented you from sharing your experience?
No,
You're not.
no,
So
not
they
at
don't.
all.
So they
No.
just decide to keep the secret out of solidarity,
Mhm.
or just okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think, it's kind of an unspoken thing that and there are a few rules like on the house floor, you're not supposed to disparage a fellow member and things like that, just out of decorum. But and for me, I didn't really have a problem with individuals. Even people on the other side of the aisle, I made great friends with people who had different political views than me. To me, it was seeing the system take a toll on them or
Yes.
seeing the system, like seeing how they interact in that system and realizing that it's like that phrase, don't hate the player, hate the game. You know,
Yes.
it's
Oop.
like I'm upset with things that are happening in this system. I can
Yeah.
see how people fall into the roles that they fall into. And it's not a good look on them, but I don't disparage them as a person. That happened like very rarely. Even though that's what people want to hear. They want to hear like, oh, who did you have beef with and whatever. It's like, well,
Yes.
I mean,
You haven't even
not that
brought
many
one name
people.
up during this
Yeah.
podcast. It's really about, it's more
Yeah.
than I thought. It wasn't about aiming at somebody who really ruined it for all of you. It was really more about, I'm surprised that they are letting people express themselves about just how broken the system is.
I try. I have to say it's a lot easier now that I'm not in office and I don't have to worry about getting reelected all the time. Um, but yeah, I think it's important enough to have that conversation and let people know what's really going on because then once they see how things are getting done or are not getting done, hopefully they'll realize maybe if I played a bigger part in this, it wouldn't be this way.
Yep.
You know,
This will
yeah,
even encourage them to step in.
yeah,
Because if they
yeah,
don't know about what's going wrong, they can't actually get involved, right? They can.
exactly.
So,
Yeah.
and my last question, what advice would you give to a young woman who aspires to enter politics? Would you still encourage her to pursue it, or would you have some reservations?
I always have reservations
Okay.
still. Um, but I wouldn't discourage anyone from doing it. What I would say to them is that running for elected office and sort of putting yourself under that microscope and putting yourself into that toxic environment without support is not the only way to go.
Okay.
Because politics is about more than just the people who are serving in office that we see sitting at the grand desks down on the house floor. It's people who are actually writing policy. It's people who are working behind the scenes. It's people who are in advocacy work, which, so many times we see advocates who come inside and they get chewed up and spit right back out into the world because really they have so much empathy and compassion and understanding for people that that system is like incredibly inhospitable rather to them. And so we need them. Like we need advocates and community organizers just as much as we need elected officials. It's not the be all end all of things. And I know that is probably weird for me to say because I would love to see more women in office, but I want to see more women serving in elected office and being in politics in general who are supported, who are trained, who know what to expect.
Yes.
So that they're not put in the same situation that I found myself in, where again, after hearing that, not to suggest that one podcast can change somebody's life, but after hearing that podcast episode, my view of how things were completely changed. And it wasn't months until I had packed up my entire family and left the state. Wow. Because I just knew it was mentally and physically harming me in such a deep way that I couldn't see any other way out of it other than to just completely remove myself. And there are people who may handle that way better than I did. My story is not the only story. There are still women that I served with that I admire and respect who are there today, who seem to be fine. but I've also had conversations with them when I knew that they weren't fine. Yes. And I worry about them just as much as I would worry about anybody else that I encourage to participate without having that support and framework and network of people that they can rely on and trust to tell them how to navigate things. So that's really my other goal, is to help people understand, like, this is tough, and not just for the reasons maybe you've already identified, but like you're going to experience things, like I've literally been in the room as a woman when my rights were stripped away. And I just couldn't, believe that people expected me to show up the next day. Like I didn't know what to do in those situations. So I want people to realize that it's going to be tough, but I want there to be enough support for them that when we encourage women to participate in representative government, that we have their back when they do it.
Great insight.
Thank you for this conversation. It's been amazing.
Merleyn, we are there. I can't even believe it. And you know what? The first time that we spoke together, an hour went by as fast as it did now. So I knew it was going to go fast this time as well. So once again, thank you for sitting with us and sharing your story. It means a lot. And once again, I will add in the description down below Merleyn information. Please reach out to her if you have any type of question. She's there for you. And make sure to connect with her regarding her bracelet and everything that you are an activist still to this day. So make sure to connect with her regarding what she does. She's on the move. Thank you so very much, Merleyn, for coming today.
Thank you. My pleasure.